I'm going to be an outlier here. I still think Jalin Hyatt is worth it at wide receiver 70.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dynasty. Like, because I think that his skill set is different than anybody else's skill set on this roster. I still think that. I think he's a deep threat. And I mean, people comp into Will Fuller, and I get that comp. I don't hate it. I'm terrible at comps anyway. But if he can kind of set up and be that guy for, 4 catches, 80 yards, touchdown, or whatever the case may be, I think he's a guy at wide receiver 70. That's a dart throw. What is up, guys? Today on the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show, we'll be navigating crowded wide receiver rooms, and let's get started. What wide receiver will earn the most targets in Jacksonville Jaguars offense? This is a tough question. This is what everybody's been talking about. Where are you going to get these guys? So, Jeff, where are you going? Who we at? Calvin Ridley, Zay Jones, Christian Kirk. Who do you believe in that room?
Calvin Ridley is going to get the most targets in that room. He's the best player in that room. And a lot of where he's operated traditionally was the areas of the field that Christian Kirk operated last year. And so I think that when you look at where they used, say, Jones, where they used Marvin Jones, they had a little bit lower ADOTs. They used him a little bit more underneath. And Calvin Ridley is better attacking down the field than Christian Kirk is. And so if Calvin Ridley is stepping into that role where Christian Kirk got the most targets last year, then he's going to get the most targets. And it's pretty simple on that. Now, when you're looking at Dynasty, the big question becomes Calvin Ridley's impending contract status, and Christian Kirk has a big balloon on his contract, and Zay Jones does as well. And so it's going to be interesting to see in terms of Dynasty where the contracts fall out.
Yeah, so Ridley and Kirk is the debate, right? I think Zay Jones so I'm doing the Jaguars team reports, which you should check out at footballguys.com, August updates there. But I think they've all had their moments. Zay Jones is a red zone target hog. He's a contested catch monster. Christian Kirk is still doing his thing. Calvin Ridley looks like the player that he was back in 2020 when we regarded him as one of the top 10 receivers in the NFL. And so because of that, I think Ridley's ceiling is much higher. I think Ridley does earn more targets than Christian Kirk, but I will say I think those two are going to pace the team. I think they're both very viable options. And so when you start to talk about their dynasty value, in Dynasty right now, Calvin Ridley's going as the wide receiver 27, and Christian Kirk is going as the wide receiver 38. And so I think when you start to factor in age, the contract situation, maybe there's a little too much discrepancy in terms of their dynasty value, because I don't think that the difference between Ridley and Kirk is going to be that drastic this year.
To me, Kirk is the new Brandon Cooks. Like when you're looking at it from a value perspective in Dynasty, like that, hey, can be that wide receiver 2 late end and then have those kind of boom weeks. And you have that. I mean, last year we did see. So I think the thing with Kirk is he did have a 23% target share, but he still only finishes wide receiver 18. And so you're looking at Ridley coming in, you expect that drop back a little bit, but you do like that he was 12th in deep target. So you saw that 5th in red zone target. And there is a thing to talk about with Lawrence and Kirk being there. And I do think Lawrence can hold up to fantasy relevant wide receivers easily. Like I really do think that in the tight end room, and I think this offense can. So I like them both. I think from a dynasty perspective, I agree with you a little bit, Christian. I think Kirk's a safer kind of asset just based on age. And I think Ridley could have that boom year this year and in the contract, whatever the case may be there. But I like Kirk value right now. I like his ADP value. And I actually think he's a value in the trade market as well.
But what are you getting? I mean, you're getting a guy that last year was his upside. Last year we saw his upside as the #1 wide receiver in the offense. Trevor Lawrence developed and really second half of the year really stood out. And so you've already seen Christian Kirk as that #1 wide receiver. Now Calvin Ridley is stepping in, and we've seen Calvin Ridley in the past as a #1 wide receiver threaten and be a top 5 dynasty wide receiver asset. Now, granted, that was multiple years ago. I just think the ceilings on these two players in terms of potential and talent and where they can affect your dynasty roster, where they can build your team towards, are just apples and oranges. And, I mean, if you want to go with Christian Kirk and you kind of want to lay in that, maybe that safe back end wide receiver 2 kind of at the wide receiver 38 value, I mean, that's fine. I just don't know that it's going to swing matchups the way that Calvin Ridley's ceiling potentially can.
See, I guess I'd push back a little bit on that, because I think last year the ceiling for Kirk was with that Trevor Lawrence-led offense that did struggle for a bit. I mean, they had 3 wins in their first 8, 9, 10 games, something like that last year. And then once the offense hit stride, I think it was in good shape. But I think this year we're looking at a top 3 passing attack. To me, there's going to be more touchdown upside. There's going to be more targets to go around. I think this offense is going to be one of the most dominant in football. And so maybe that upside last year, even with Calvin Ridley's inclusion in this offense, maybe Kirk holds what he did last year. I was thinking about it earlier today. I wouldn't be shocked if this is the team that had, 2 top 15 wide receivers this year. Now, the counter argument to that is Evan Ingram still has to eat. Travis Etienne still has to eat. I feel Tank Bigsby is going to eat a little bit in this offense. And Zay Jones, we haven't really mentioned him. He's still a good wide receiver that they like. But I do think, like I said, Ridley and Kirk pacing what should be a much improved offense. I think you're feeling good about, I guess, both values. I think when I'm drafting Kirk in Dynasty startups, I'm looking at him as a really nice wide receiver 3-piece. Whereas Calvin Ridley creeps into that, okay, I have to draft him as my wide receiver 2, and then I start to worry a little bit about age and if he's going to hold up because we haven't seen it in so long.
I do think Zay Jones is the piece that people are sleeping on. I think that you're looking at wide receiver 66. I know the third wide receiver in an offense, you don't love that. But Zay Jones, I know that he struggled to start his career, but he was a second-round pick. And he's got pedigree. He was insanely productive at Eastern Carolina. Took him a little bit to get things figured out, and now he's kind of there. And so we saw a strong end of 2021. He was good the second half of that year, and then he was good all year last year. And so to just write him off and to shuffle these targets solely into 2 wide receivers, I think that ignores, one, the reality with Evan Ingram, but 2, Zay Jones as well. And so Jones is a guy that's laying out there that if an injury allows for it potentially, or maybe even without, if you need him on a bye week, those types of things, I think he's a great value lingering out there. And he's locked down too in terms of contract with the team.
Surprised you didn't say he's just a best ball guy. That's what we do to those guys. Oh, hey, he's a best ball guy there. No, I'm on the Kirk train. Like I'm disagreeing with Jeff a little bit. I think with Kirk, you're getting a guy that got 133 targets last year. You have kind of that baked in floor. But Ridley, there's not a guarantee Ridley stays healthy either. Like we've seen this, we've talked about it. Like that rust. Maybe Kirk comes in and he's still the wide receiver 1 on a top 5 passing offense. That could be realistically just a target getter, but we'll see how that plays out. Me and Jeff we'll have a side bet, and Christian as well. But before we move on, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode. Comment below with your questions, any trades or thoughts on a topic that we have on this show.
Also, make sure to head to footballguys.com/plans to become a premium subscriber. Elite subscribers get custom Dynasty content for less than $15 monthly or $70 annually. Everyone who purchases a Football Guys subscription has 30 days from the date of purchase to request their money back if they're unsatisfied. But you won't be. Join today.
All right, let's get into the Los Angeles Chargers because this is going to be a fun one. Kellen Moore being there as offensive coordinator. I think the question is, you have Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Quentin Johnston, and Joshua Palmer. And I believe Jeff's writing the spotlight. Are you doing the spot or not the spotlight? The team reports for the Chargers?
Team reports, make sure to check those out. Footballguys.com, check out the team reports. We dive in and we give you bullet points for every team, but we really go through the positions and look at what's happening there.
So he's our resident expert here on the Chargers. So you have Keenan Allen at 31. You have Mike Williams at 28. Quentin Johnston at 21, age 20. These are the ages. And then Joshua Palmer is sitting out there at 23, which I feel like Palmer should be older than that. I feel like he's been in the league. We've been talking about him. But my question for Jeff, Keenan Allen, are we worried the age cliff there? Towards the end of the year last year when he came back from the hamstring, he was wide receiver, 1 point per game. You saw the output that he put in. Everybody talks about league winner. But are we banking on that again for one last year in Dynasty? You can get that little ounce of him. Go maybe get him on the market on a contending team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this offense has the upside to be there. One of the things that have come out of the camp reports regarding Keenan Allen is the team is focused on getting him more involved early in downs instead of kind of leaving him as that third down safety blanket. They want to get him the ball earlier. And the other thing with Mike Williams, they're working on moving Mike Williams to the slot a lot more than they have in the past. And so trying to alternate where you're going to line up everybody. And that's been a key focus for Kellen Moore's offense coming in, is to move these wide receivers throughout formation to pick out the best matchup and then to go to those players early and often. And I think last year what we saw a little bit out of the Chargers offense, the dump downs from Mike Lombardi's offense was less than ideal given the talent that Justin Herbert possesses. That's why you saw a lot on Austin Eckler. That was kind of the scheme up on this. But when you've got these 4 wide receivers that are big physical wide receivers that can win downfield, and Justin Herbert has the arm to attack downfield vertically, that's the expectation that you're getting going to get out of this offense. I do think Josh Palmer has been written off in Dynasty because of the addition of Quentin Johnston, and maybe that future is not there as a number one overall wide receiver for this offense, but I don't think that was ever there. But I think that they still like him quite a bit, and he does have that ability to make big plays down the field.
Yeah, he's the best value here, in my opinion. So one thing with the offensive change as well is last year they ran the ball on first down a ton, despite not being very successful at it. It was just something that they traditionally did. They ran Eckler on an inside zone play or a duo play, and it just didn't make any sense. So this year, I think they're going to get to that passing attack a little bit earlier. I think they're going to be pass heavier. If I had to guess, they haven't added another running back. And so when you talk about Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, they're some of the riskiest assets, I think, because of their injury history. But if you're a contender, they've kind of stayed healthy. These are like dynasty trade deadline acquisitions. If I'm making a push towards a championship, those are guys I kind of want to go get. But if I have them right now and I'm not necessarily contending, I'm kind of selling for anything with Keenan Allen, simply because I do think that this is one of the last years. I think Quentin Johnston, Joshua Palmer, like Jeff said, I mean, he's had a great camp. He's been motivated from the Quentin Johnston draft selection. And I think that this offense is going to support multiple wide receivers almost on a weekly basis. And so if one of those two ahead of them goes down, I think Palmer could be that guy that steps up, kind of like he was last year. I think that's the reason for excitement with Palmer, especially at his crazy ADP right now.
Yeah, I think with Palmer, though, people are turned off by the fact that he didn't step up last year, but that's a different offense. I think that's one thing you have to make sure you understand is like, it's a different system, different offense in there. I'm still going back to Quentin Johnston. He's sitting at wide receiver 26 in ADP this last month. That is way too low for Quentin Johnston to be tied to Justin Herbert. Like, that's just too low to me. Like, when you're looking at the wide receivers going around him, Amari Cooper's right there. Treylon Burks has a higher ADP than Quentin Johnston. I think I would trade Treylon Burks for straight up for Quentin Johnston if I was in there. Like, I wouldn't feel comfortable drafting him there. So, like, I still think Quentin Johnston's a value. Like, you're looking at Keenan Allen at being 31. If he moves on, Mike Williams, the back injury, we've seen that before. Like, you're still talking about a kid that's, tied with Justin Herbert in an offense that we all love. Like, I just don't think his ADP reflects that right now.
Yeah, and I think there's some lazy comps that have happened on Quentin Johnston in terms of the social media bubble when it comes to fantasy Twitter and all that nonsense that I think has kind of played in on that value, and then plus the depth of the wide receivers. And that's the one thing to mention on Keenan Allen, on moving him right now, because of I think that the narrative around the amount of wide receivers, whereas if he's producing, once you get in like week 3, 4, 5, if he's producing as a wide receiver 1, and you start to have those league mates that their team they've lost an injury or whatever it might be, and they're seeing that proof out that Keenan Allen is still that elite producer. Quentin Johnston hasn't just come in and erased this guy that is going to go into at least the Chargers Ring of Honor, if not flirt with the NFL Hall of Fame. And so I think that kind of the expectation, especially in dynasty circles, is this rookie comes in the first round and just eliminates the veteran automatically. But I think that when people see those points coming in naturally from Keenan Allen and the ceiling in this offense, I think you're going to have a situation where you're able to capitalize a lot better on that trade value than you are sitting here in early August.
Yeah. All right. Let's jump over to the Baltimore Ravens. So going into this new system with Tom Monken's there, I wrote a spotlight for Lamar Jackson. So if you want to go look at how this passing offense is going to look, I checked that out. But let's talk about this wide receiver room. So we got Rashod Bateman, 23. We got Odell Beckham Jr., 30. I saw him getting some buzz today in camp. We love that. Everybody's doing well in camp. Zay Flowers at 22. And then who threw Isaiah Likely in this? I believe that must have been Jeff Bell. Isaiah Likely tied in at 23. What are we doing with this room? So, I mean, there's a lot of question marks. Rashod Bateman's injuries. Zay Flowers has come on really strong. He's a player that I've liked for a long time. I think he could be in there. We like it. Is OBJ a guy that maybe you go after? Are we forgetting about OBJ in terms of like these 30-year-old wide receivers that would take a shot on a contending team? What do you think, Jeff?
I mean, if you can get OBJ off your dynasty roster right now, that's probably a blessing to you. That this is the guy that he was a dead asset a year ago, and borderline, if it wasn't for his name value, he probably would have been dropped in many leagues. And now he's got a little bit of buzz, which is exciting for him. But when I think that when you really distill it down, obviously Mark Andrews is going to be a major factor still there. Zay Flowers is the one that I'm circling twice, that I think that everything you've heard out of camp, when you look at his game, his ability to attack in the intermediate, to be that primary receiver, to work underneath. I think when you look at Bateman, yes, you mentioned the injury questions. He wants a new contract. And I think that the team kind of looks at that as, hey, you know, we've got Zay Flowers locked up for the next 5 years. And if he is close or not even better than Rashod Bateman, he's going to be the focal point of this offense, along with Mark Andrews, is my expectation. And I still believe that Isaiah likely will be involved. There's a lot of talk right now that they're going to play 3 wide receiver sets. I'm a little bit more skeptical on that because likely does have that upside. And because we saw the 2 tight end usage in Georgia that Monken is coming from, the success that he had with that, I think Patrick Ricard is still going to be involved. And I kind of wonder if he's going to be, maybe sneaks down a tight end just a little bit out of that fullback position. And maybe he's a little bit of that Darnell Washington, just kind of that extra lineman in the formations that allows Mark Andrews to free up and break free. Yeah. But it's really going to be an offense schemed on getting Mark Andrews, and I think Zay Flowers free, and the other players will. Nelson Aguilar probably deserves mention, but Rashod Bateman and Odell Beckham, their ability to hit splash plays.
Yeah, so this is the time of year, though, when it's a good opportunity for Zay Flowers because Rashod Bateman hasn't been on the field. And so what I really want to see is what this looks like when all 3 of them are on the field, because I do think that each one of these players, while they're similar in that they're explosive players, they can create after the catch, they can attack kind of all 3 areas of the field, all 3 levels. I don't know what the separation is going to be when all 3 of them are healthy. And so there's been a lot of Odell Beckham buzz in the last week or so, and I've actually seen that Odell's actually been the best receiver, but Zay Flowers is the new toy, and everyone's kind of been reporting on that. What happens when Rashod Bateman kind of integrates into this offense? I think Rashod Bateman is still a fantastic wide receiver. We've seen flashes of that. He's just struggled to stay healthy, and there's a plethora of receivers that struggled to stay healthy through their first 2 years, finally got it right, and right now they're just being cautious with him. So Chris Godwin is a comp that comes up a lot for Rashod Bateman in terms of career outlook, and that's something I think we could still see. Now, in terms of dynasty, I think you're right, Jeff. You get out of Odell as quickly as you can this season, because another injury is kind of like the thing you would be worried about, and I don't know if you're going to get the weekly production. But Bateman's a guy that I'm still targeting because, like I said, we have the knowledge that Zay is dominating camp. He's being explosive. What happens when Rashod's there?
Yeah, no, I'm with you on this. I think Rashod and Zay are guys that you can buy. I do think that they have their ADPs in the 30s and wide receiver, in terms of where they're getting drafted, what their value is. Bateman's a little cheaper now because Zay's getting the camp buzz. But you hit the point on their target separation last year. Baltimore's target separation for the receivers was awful. They ranked 78th in the league in terms of like the metric overall for as a group. Each player as you're going through there, that's not good. And so, but I do think his new passing concepts, when they bring it in there, high, low, and the smash concepts, there's 2 ways. Rashod did very well with that in Minnesota when he was in college. He was excellent at that, especially play action down the seam. You're going to see that from the slot as well. So I do think him and Zay will play off of each other. The OBJ is the killer because he's going to hurt these guys because when they're all on the field, if they're all healthy, I think it limits what they can do a little bit in terms of fantasy production. I think offensively, yeah, they'll be great. But the key thing for me is the screens. The way that they utilize screens in this offense, I think it really goes towards Zay. And I think Zay could really kind of do well there. We saw a little bit when he was in college, but not enough. But if he does that, they incorporate over 100 screen passes last year at Georgia. If they do that again and we see these guys get the ball in their hands, I mean, that's where fantasy production is going to come from in their yak ability. All right, let's jump over to Kansas City. So this room is it's loaded. So we got, well, I don't want to say loaded. There's a lot of pieces in it. Kansas City, we have Kadarius Toney, 24, age 24. Skyy Moore's at 22. Marcus Valdes-Scantling, he's 28. Justin Watson's out there at 27. Rashee Rice at 23. And then Justin Ross, the guy who just gets all the buzz, he's at 23 as well. What are we doing with this room? Like, I know we did a kind of thing for Football Guys website, and we all kind of had our opinions here. I think we're pretty aligned on this one. Jeff, where are you going?
So I think that probably the players, I think Skyy Moore is going to probably get the most snaps out of any of these wide receivers. And I think that Marcus Valdes-Scantling and Justin Watson are going to play probably the second and third most snaps. And fantasy is going to hate that because they want to see the young guys get on the field. I kind of expect with Rashee Rice to kind of get that redshirt year a little bit like Skyy Moore did last year, where the Chiefs kind of had taught him every position. Really, when you look at in terms of football, when you break it down, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, yes, he is frustrating and he's driven everybody crazy, but he still has that ability to stretch the field vertically, whereas Judson Watson is one of the very, very best run, pass, blocking wide receivers, and he's almost like an extra fullback on the field, and the Chiefs use him as such. And because of Patrick Mahomes' ability to attack vertically, the way that safeties are playing the Chiefs offense so deep and then locking down in Travis Kelce as much as possible, where the Chiefs found great success last year is working underneath and getting the ball in their receivers' hands to create. Skyy Moore is able to do that. Kadarius Toney is able to do that. And Richie James is able to do that. And so I expect that those are going to be the guys that are kind of soaking up that. We saw at times Juju Smith-Schuster was very useful in fantasy last year. He kind of had that underneath role. I expect Skyy Moore to be the first one to step up there. Kadarius Toney's a little bit more of a gadget player than I think that you really would like in fantasy, but he has the ability to make explosive plays, and so that's what draws your eyeballs. And I think Richie James, we didn't mention him, but you can't write him off. That leaves Justin Ross, and Justin Ross is a great story in camp, and he makes you feel really good that he's out there and doing this. But I do think that he's kind of land with Rashee Rice a little bit and be that red shirt, kind of be that guy behind Watson and Valdes-Scantling, as those guys are the vets out there that know exactly what their job is, and they can do that very well for the Chiefs.
Yeah. I mean, Skyy Moore until it's over. It's always Skyy Moore on this side over here. No, I think the main thing, there was a lot of Kadarius Toney buzz, even in Dynasty this year. A lot of redraft, a lot of best ball, but there's been some Kadarius Toney buzz in Dynasty, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Jeff. He's a gadget player, and I'm not certain that he can win routes downfield. Now, you talk about, well, the Chiefs do have to operate underneath because of how they are being played on defense. That will change, as they continue to attack underneath. They're going to have a guy that can win downfield. And once Travis Kelce's kind of getting to this older age, they're going to have to adapt their offense. Andy Reid's the best person to do it, but I think Skyy Moore is the one constant that I feel really comfortable about. I like Rashee Rice as a dynasty asset, but I'm not expecting much from him this year, so I would kind of wait to go get him until people panic like they did with Skyy Moore. And then I'll have both of those players on my dynasty rosters, and I probably won't be touching any of these other guys.
Yeah. As far as the dynasty, Skyy Moore or Rashee Rice, those are the only two guys I want on my dynasty roster. That's the only ones I feel comfortable with. All aboard a Skyy train in terms of like, if Kelce was to go down or you're looking for that wide receiver too, his yak ability sets him apart. He was 6 in yak per reception last year. And if he can do that and this to offense, that's what you're looking for. I mean, it's pretty simple in terms of that. All right, before we continue, we want to tell you about our strategy session giveaway. The three of us are committed to helping you win your dynasty leagues, and we are giving away live strategy sessions here to 3 lucky listeners. Now, we have a bunch that have already kind of sent us emails and we've talked about it. Here's how you do it. We'll sit down and chat with you and analyze how you approach your roster. All you have to do is leave a review for the podcast, take a screenshot and email it to Coleman@footballguys.com. Or if you want to screenshot it and send it to me on Twitter @DuBois_22, you can do that as well. We're going to be picking our winners here pretty soon, so get that in before we pick them. All right, let's go to the New York Giants. Let's take a look at this. This team, again, kind of similar to like Kansas City, except for they don't have Patrick Mahomes, a quarterback. We have Isaiah Hodgins, 24 years old, Darius Slayton at 26, Parris Campbell at 26, Jalin Hyatt, Christian's favorite, at 21, Sterling Shepard, and Wan'Dale Robinson, ACL, hopeful to be back there. I'm going Parris Campbell, baby. I'm on the Parris Campbell train, and he's going to pop at some point, right? Ohio State fan, Jeff. I do think Parris has an ability to do this, but this is a lot of the same wide receiver in this room. I have a take for Hyatt, but Christian, where are you going with this one?
I don't want this room.
None of them,
man.
Just none of them. Just
no,
avoid?
Like if I'm taking shots, Isaiah Hodgins is the one guy that stands out as the guy that has a different skill set. And while a lot of people have written him off and he hasn't had the best camp in the world, he is still running with the starters. Despite all of the new faces, Isaiah Hodgins is still a starting wide receiver. And I think that his play down the stretch last year warrants that. He was really good. He caught a lot of balls. He has some of the surest hands on the team. Outside of that, I think Darius Slayton's role is going to get eaten by Jalin Hyatt, but I don't think it's going to be immediate. I don't know what that actually looks like. Sterling Shepard, to me, is a guy that's still going to play when when he's healthy this year. He is going to play. And so I think that when you look at this room and what it can be for fantasy this year, just give me Isaiah Hodgins as a dart throw. But I think all of these guys are pretty much dynasty dart throws. There's not a single guy that I feel comfortable with on my rosters.
I mean, Darren Waller is the wide receiver 1, and Saquon Barkley might be the wide receiver 2. I mean, if we're being honest with this offense. And so I expect that. I expect Daniel Bellinger to still be involved, to see some 12 personnel using 2 tight ends. That's something that we talked about quite a bit on last week's show, talking about the evolution of offenses and I think what Brian Daboll wants to do. The arrival of Darren Waller, treating him as the #1 wide receiver. I think narrative set in on this room when you saw Jamison Crowder get signed and Cole Beasley and Sterling Shepard, and everybody just thought they're a room full of slot receivers. And I don't think that's true when you really break it down. When you're looking at these players that are here now, I think Wan'Dale Robinson, that he was a college running back for the first part of his career, and I think that's a player we've seen him make plays downfield, assuming he's able to get back off the ACL. We know Jalin Hyatt can make plays downfield. Darius Slayton's the same thing. Isaiah Hodgins, he's not a slot receiver. He's a big prototype X type receiver, and so he's got that size to be able to work in those areas. And Parris Campbell, even for being a traditional slot-ish receiver, he can get downfield too, and he's got speed and explosion. And so I think that narrative kind of went one direction because you saw these guys, Jamison Crowder and Cole Beasley. And I think that those were players that were brought in as players who knew what Brian Daboll wanted to run, and veterans. And yeah, sure, if they hit in camp, then you're thrilled on that. But otherwise, they're kind of adults in the room that help these wide receivers kind of pull things together and develop a little bit. And I would be surprised if they make the final roster. And I think the way we got it broken down here is a good look on actually having players that can do different things that require a wide receiver, but it goes back to Darren Waller being the wide receiver 1 and Saquon Barkley being the wide receiver 2.
I'm going to be an outlier here. I still think Jalin Hyatt is worth it at wide receiver 7.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dynasty. Like, because I think that his skill set is different than anybody else's skill set on this roster. I still think that. I think he's a deep threat. And I mean, people comp into Will Fuller, and I get that comp. I don't hate it. I'm terrible at comps anyway. But if he can kind of set up and be that guy for, 4 catches, 80 yards, touchdown, or whatever the case may be, I think he's a guy at wide receiver 70. That's a dart throw. I mean, you could just take him, and then if he becomes that guy in this offense moving forward, and he becomes the kind of that piece, that missing piece. But I don't necessarily think it's going to be this year. So if like Hyatt, he's going to have a learning curve, and it could be early. I know he's been coming on lately in camps, and all the reports are saying, like, hey, he's a student of the game, but all the little things from coaches are he's got to take some time. He needs some time to learn this. And we knew that coming from that Tennessee system. So like Hyatt, to me, which we don't think of as being like a dynasty stash, but in reality probably is this year. He's that kid that like maybe in the middle of the year he comes on and you kind of recoup some value if you want to, or he's get a little bit buzz. But I'm still on the Hyatt train there. I like Campbell just because he's been a guy that I thought is just talented, you just can't get on the field. But give me Hyatt too. I think Hyatt's a fun stash in this one. The other guys, yeah, Hodgins probably be that PPR guy this year, but from a dynasty perspective, I think Hyatt might be the best investment, and because it's cheap. Like, yeah, I like cheap things, and that's kind of how I look there. All right, we're going to run through these last 2 teams. We got Seattle Seahawks, and I think the big question here is you have DK Metcalf, he's only 25, Tyler Lockett at 30, and then JSN at 21. My question for Christian is this. You have Tyler Lockett and JSN. Who do you think scores more fantasy points this season? We know it's going to be JSN after this. Do you think JSN can, because this is a big debate right now, can JSN kind of outproduce Tyler Lockett, or do you think Tyler Lockett holds it down this year?
I think Tyler Lockett's one of the better receivers in the NFL still. And so that's where I get a little hung up. Like, he's a very talented receiver. I think Lockett's still going to score more points this year. That's how I have them projected for 2023. Now, that does not impact my dynasty ranking of Jaxon Smith-Njigba at all, because when you start to look at this receiver room, even past this, Lockett's 30, so you're starting to look past, his contract and what that looks like. D. Eskridge is the next best receiver. He's suspended, I think, right now. So he's had a good camp. So I think they feel okay about him moving forward as like that wide receiver 3 with Jaxon Smith-Njigba taking over for Lockett. But for this year, I still think Lockett's going to be that guy unless this room experiences injury. And so that's not something I traditionally account for heavily in my projections. What I'm curious to see is how they are deployed. I think Jaxon Smith-Njigba has the ability to go all over the formation. I think really him and Lockett can do that. And so if they start to, interchange a little bit more than what we expect, then maybe Jaxon has a late season push, but for me, it's still Lockett.
Yeah, and I think you touched on the deployment there. That's the big question. You look at DK Metcalf, he made some major strides in growth last year as being a more rounded wide receiver from where he was early in his career, and kind of working more in the intermediate, becoming that primary receiver that can eat a lot of volume, that you can get him involved in the quick passing game and those types of things. And that's really the strength of Jaxon Smith-Njigba. So my question really on this wide receiver group is if Smith-Njigba locks down that area of the field and kind of shuffles DK Metcalf back to more of that big play wide receiver, which I don't know that you really want to do as you grow in this offense. But in terms of, I feel like I don't know, it's probably the wrong way to do fantasy analysis, but grab the cheapest one out of this group and enjoy the points is kind of the way that I look at it.
It's a weird spot. I think JSN could be the best wide receiver on this roster next year. Like next year, 2024. Yeah. Oh, JSN, top 12 dynasty asset. He's in there. But Lockett can just produce. Like, and I think that's the thing. And then that's the biggest question there. But I do think I want JSN over all of this stuff. You know, DK and everything there. I'm still a JSN guy. I think JSN's moving forward. He's that dynasty asset that you definitely want. And I do think this roster and this they're going to run the ball more than people want to believe too. Like I do think there's some limitations on this wide receiver room, because I think that, you know, when I did the running back kind of, you know, reading the room, I was talking about them and looking at that in terms of our article. They're heavy on this. They want to run, and they believe in DJ Dallas. They believe in Kenny McIntosh. They believe in all those guys in that roster, and they're going to have that. So you're going to see that volume there. So who's going to be the most efficient guy in that room? It's usually Tyler Lockett. Like, that is usually where it goes, and that's, I think, the biggest question. Just something to keep in mind as we go into the season, and maybe a fun buy too, because you can't get anything for Lockett right now. I mean, it's almost impossible because people are just seeing him moving on. All right, last team. We'll get through this one quick. Carolina Panthers. We got DJ Chark there. He's 26 years old. Adam Thielen, 32. He's ancient. Johnston Mingo at 22. Terrace Marshall Jr. at 23. And then we got Visca coming back. We're going to use him like Debo again, age 24. You saw him in the backfield there. So we're going to keep this one as quick as we can. If you could buy one guy in this room, Jeff, who you buying?
DJ Chark is going to be the guy that I'm going to buy.
Dang it. We're going to all agree on this.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, it's Chark. Yeah. So the quick thing that I want to say. So Jonathan Mingo is listed as a starter on their first official depth chart, unofficial depth chart, not official. But one of their beat reporters said, "This is shocking. He drops a pass every single practice, and he dropped one in the end zone today." And so my main hang up with Jonathan Mingo was that he couldn't catch the ball, and he's not catching the ball in camp. So while that might not matter, he might be a starter, I still think Chark is that dude in this offense this year.
Chark, I'm a Chark guy right now. Like, you know, and you're getting him at wide receiver 63. He's only 26. So essentially driving him as like a wide receiver 6 or 7 on your roster if you have him there. And I mean, you're looking at this ADOT, everything he has, you know, 15 over 15. Like, and Chark's like the perfect flex guy that's going to have that big game where it's going to win you a week. 27 points, you put him in. And he's their deep threat though. Like, when you're looking at that roster, like, he's that guy that can kind of separate the defense. And by all accounts from the camp reports here in fall, DJ and Bryce have a tremendous chemistry. Like, they are actually, and these are the things that you kind of look at. I think DJ coming in could be that guy for them. No one's kicking the tires on Visca. We're not kicking the tires on Visca.
No.
I mean, she's free. I don't know. If you deep enough league, maybe, but I think the creative usage could be there, especially when you look at the lack of depth.
We got one, Christian. We gotta clip it. We're clipping that. We're and then we're gonna put on social
for like 400 yards. So I mean, I'm not.
No. We're not clipping that. We're clipping the Visca, and then we're gonna put it on socials. Jeff Bell says Visca is back, and then we're gonna put Terminator out there for you. Yeah,
put Debo's picture on it too.
Put Debo's picture on there. Yeah, and then just put Shanahan in the back, just benching Trey. All right, that's your wide receiver room. So when you're looking at navigating crowded wide receiver rooms, kind of who we like, who's our dynasty kind of buys, who do you think is going to do this year? So we're diving into it.
Yes, and the full version of this show can be found on your favorite podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. If you're enjoying the show, go download it there and subscribe to the Football Guys Dynasty Football Show.